And we're back again, baby. Episode 7. Episode 7, that's pretty good. 7 episodes. 7 weeks we've been doing this podcast. Nate and I back on the Zoom. And we're ready to come at you with some thought processes, So I hope you're excited for this one. This one's gonna be fun. And yeah, enjoy the program, brothers and sisters. All right, welcome.
So, dude, I got a little light topic to start us off. I got this buddy at school. I'll tell you his name later. I'm not gonna do that on the podcast, but he hit me up recently and kind of was like, "Hey, I just switched to business, and I kind of got into this relationship with this mentor that I found through like one of my bosses, like a business mentor kind of thing. Have you ever thought about something like that? Would you be interested?" And I was like, yeah, I've heard cool stories about like people in business, like getting a mentor, which is really just like somebody that they work with,
right,
that like knows more shit than they do. And then like
he was pitching you a mentor.
he was more like telling me that he had one and that he'd be willing to like hook me up if I was also interested, which is suspicious right off the bat, right? So yeah, so I was like, okay, that sounds cool. And he was like, kind of like, well, let's have a meeting about it or whatever. And so he like kind of threw me in a group chat with this dude, and we had a conversation last week, and it was fine. I liked him.
Yeah.
And then now
did you feel like, oh, he's got some kind of weird shit that he could like learn me?
No, I just kind of like, it wasn't like that at all. He didn't try to sell me on anything. It wasn't like that at all. And I was like, I kind of like was feeling good about it afterwards. I was like, this is cool. Like if like I was still skeptical, but I was like, this is kind of cool. If this is a real thing, like I would really benefit from this. Like, then the kid calls me afterwards, and he's just like being so ambiguous about like the next steps kind of thing. And I'm like, all right, like now I'm really suspicious. Like I really wasn't, and now I am. And then, tonight I was supposed to have a meeting, and I didn't go because I got the last name of the guy, and there was like a whole Reddit feed about him. Just like, and he.
Oh, what?
Yeah, and like, so he works. Yeah, to be fair, no, because it's not illegal.
Yeah, okay, but
yeah. So I just want to be fair. Like, if he is watching this, like this kid is like a nice kid, and I really like him, and I do respect our friendship a lot. It's just not like what I want to do. It's labeled as a multi-level marketing business, which is basically a nice way to say a pyramid scheme. Yeah. So, I had to just talk to him about like I canceled, and I had to talk to him why, because he's my friend, and I'm kind of worried that like he's kind of sucked into it too. But it's like,
right.
He's making money off of this, and it's not illegal. Like I looked into the like legality of the business. It's what's it called? It's called.
Well, what do they do? Like
they sell product. I got you. It's
like
right on my
phone. Tupperware salesman thing. Like
it's
I want this.
The business that he's working for is like the largest sales business in the whole fucking world. Like it's wildly profitable, and it's legal, and it's been investigated multiple times, and nothing's come up. It really does like play by the books, but it's not. Yeah, it's not my thing. Yeah. It's really not how I want to make money. Like,
yeah,
maybe one of the last ways I would want to make money. Like it was really pitched to me as a mentorship, which I feel like I really would benefit from and enjoy. And it's just not that. So the company is Amway, and that's like the OG of multi-level marketing, according to my parents and like the internet that I've been researching. Like they literally created a legal version of multi-level marketing, like a legal pyramid scheme, basically, where.
Wait, so how does that work? Like, can you break that down for like,
yeah,
knows no business, and also whoever's listening that doesn't know business?
It's basically, as you know, pyramid schemes to be like a company starts by basically they sell their product by paying other people to sell their product.
Right.
And so it's like I don't know if anyone, my family was saying that they've had a bunch of friends, and if you asked your parents, maybe they would have too. They've had a couple of instances where their friends are like selling a product, and they'll like have them over for like a big brunch and be like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
they're like part of the fucking scheme, but it's really not illegal. This company, at least Amway, they sell like supplements and food and shit like that. And so if you look up Amway, it'll come right up. Like you'll get a lot of results about it being a scam and that kind of thing. You also get some things that say like, you know, it's legal. It's just like sketchy. So basically how it works is like the person who reached out to this kid, this is like a good example that it'll explain it. Like he was like, hey, like, you know, I'll be your mentor. And then eventually this kid applied for a business license and which costs $100 to be like a part of this Amway company, and he makes money on selling people on the product. So he's basically got his whole family like buying, like that's who he's targeted so far, he said, which I'm not judging him, like, you know, like, but he's like, yeah, you know, I'm making good money every month, like selling this product, and the product is cheaper, and you know, he's just like really into it. And I was like,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how it works. It's like, you know, he recruits me, and then
Right.
I'm another like I'm sure he said that there wasn't, but I would be shocked if there wasn't some sort of monetary gain for him if I ended up buying that license for that company.
100% there is. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I've been doing DoorDash recently, and
Mhm.
they have their own kind of thing where it's like, hey, refer a friend and have them do like 60 like, you know, deliveries within a month, and you can get like $100. Um, so it's like, yeah, just trying to get more and more and more people into it. But also, like, don't you think that's kind of devilish, like selling to like your family and stuff, trying to get like, I don't know, like it's tough because I'm sure they go after young guys where it's like, okay, I want to be doing something now relevant to business, and I want to be doing something that's gonna like put me ahead, or I can put on my resume, or it's just gonna make me like money right now. And like,
Yeah. And it's clearly making him money if he was being honest about how much he was making. It's making him good money. But yeah, for me, like business is, I don't know, interesting because there's a million things you can do with it. It's not interesting because I can sell somebody something that's like the biggest eye roll for me. And like,
yeah,
you know, like that's like really the last thing I want to do. And I feel like that's what I would be worst at as an entrepreneur. That'd be like my biggest weakness is just selling,
yeah. But
which
you
is
can
a
be
huge part.
persuasive.
Say it again.
You can be persuasive for sure. Just like,
No, I wouldn't be bad at it. I just think I wouldn't enjoy it.
hmm,
I would feel like shit after, maybe. Hopefully. I mean, I hope I would.
hopefully.
I hope I would. I would hope that I would feel like shit afterward, unless it was something that I really believed in, you know?
Okay, well, have you heard like you've heard the old adage? It's something like there's no ethics in good business. Like
Mm.
if you're really doing well, if you're really like about that game,
Right.
you can't
That's,
really feel bad.
yeah. Well, I think that you have to be cognizant when you go into business of how you define good business.
Mhm.
If you're defining good business as making a fuckload of money,
Yeah,
there's no ethics in that. I mean, that's why I've talked about starting a nonprofit, because I think that it starts to eliminate the potential of making the money the main point. And you can start a business without that, but you know, it's hard to abandon that like core philosophy of business where it's like you need to make money, which is like obviously like the base of every business. But I think it's just like good business. I don't need good business. Like I don't need to be loaded. Like
right.
there's certain things I want to do for myself, and there's certain things I want to do for other people. And I think that a business is a good way to get there, you know? And so like, that's kind of like my take on it. And I really don't judge other people that do that kind of thing. Like,
Dude, in
to
that
each their own.
culture though, that culture of business is all like good business is typically what are your profit margins? Like, you
Mhm.
know, Shark Tank isn't, you know, how good does this product make people feel? It's like, oh fuck, we could sell that. Like, I can make just enough money off of, like, I mean, even the whole Shark Tank thing's fucked up because it's like, okay, little Johnny, I can make this much off of your thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I can tell that this isn't like a sustainable business model. But I'm gonna hop in on it now. We're gonna make a little bit of money. I'm gonna get just a little bit more than my money's back, almost guaranteed. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
blow up, maybe I make a little bit more. If not, you just sink. And I already made my investment back plus a little extra. Like,
Yeah.
but then you got track money. Like, uh, I don't know. That whole field, at least for somebody like me, like it's so daunting. Um, because there are a lot of people like you who are trying to go in there, do the right thing, like, you know, change the world. But like, and I put quotes on that just because so many people say like, you know, our new salad tosser is going to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our new 5-in-1 shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, whatever is going to like change the world. Um, but the people who like are actually about that, like, I think you're right. They don't really buy into that culture of big business because big business and like little business is very different. The same way, like, it's almost like business at like a university is different from like business at like a independent college. Like, I'm sure they give you
Yeah.
different kind of like values at Springfield than they would if you went to like Bentley.
Dude, and honestly, like we should get into college like as a whole topic. Like super fucking unimpressed. I mean, couldn't
Yeah,
be less impressed with that fucking business model.
I know.
But what
It's a
you were saying
for-profit model.
before, what's that?
It's a for-profit model. Like,
Yeah.
when you like education as a for-profit makes no fucking sense. But
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think the education system is just I could go on and on about that. And we definitely should dive into that. We can talk about that this podcast. There was one thing I was gonna say about what you were saying, but it's kind of lost on me now.
sorry,
Okay.
bro, did I like totally derail you?
No, no, I had it. I had it. It's not your fault. You were just saying about, dude, we didn't even smoke before this, and I can't remember. Like, I think I have problems, bro.
I
You were
know.
saying about how like businesses, like big business models,
Yeah,
fucking
big business at like a or big business is different from like mom and pop business, you know,
yeah.
like business schools at like a large university different than at a college.
It
Like,
was before that though. It was before that.
the whole philosophy of business, like the culture around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, oh my God, thank God I got it. I'm so sorry. Dude, I got it. One of my biggest fears as a human being, like talk about fears as a person,
Mhm.
is looking back on the decisions that I made and being dissatisfied with myself and like kind of losing my way. So there's certain ways that I think I would look back and be disappointed. Like I like to buy my clothes at a thrift store. What if I like make a bunch of money and then I start buying shit that I don't care about? Like what if I start selling people on things that like and I make like you're saying like I make decisions for my business that
Mhm.
make me good, like make me good business, but like they don't align with me. Like that's one of my biggest fears. And I think that's something I have to be, that I realize I need to be increasingly careful about as I enter into this business world. Like, and exactly like you're saying, I think it's something that's like people aren't out there for the most part to make the world a better place. They're out there to make their lives better, and there's value in that, but only to a certain extent. And so like that, I just want like that is like there's very few things I'm scared of. That regret absolutely fucking horrifies me because there's part of me that thinks like, yeah, that of course that could happen to me. Of course I could be swept under the wing of making a fuck ton of money and doing things that I don't believe in, you know? So,
Well, it's good that you feel that way though, because then like that argument of good business you're making, that's what will stop you from making that kind of switch from good business to like good business. Like,
mhm.
as long as you stay like conscious of it all, because that's the best we can do, right? Like, because yes, business, there are a lot of opportunities for it, but pretty much any field you go into, there are a lot of opportunities to cash out or do the unethical thing, or just like do the wrong thing. Like the fact that you already have that conscious awareness speaks so much to like um, your humanity, and the fact that like, you know, even if those pressures start to come around you, odds are you'd be able to pick that up before it like really became something that was out of control. And I mean, like, a large part of it too, I think, is the morals of the person. Like, if you are, if you're totally like, oh, I went to business school for this, so I can make a fuck ton of money, and I can take a vacation to Jackson Hole every winter with my family, and I can buy a fucking Bugatti, like, then of course you're gonna do something fucked up that's gonna hurt some people.
And people like that, dude, like our parents both being teachers, like I don't know what your life was like in the summer or on school vacations, but like we traveled a lot. Like
You know,
just like I don't know if you spent if you were like more of a camp kid or like you spent time with your family when you were on vacation with them.
mostly just my family. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, having teachers with the summers off, like that's the thing, man. Like teachers don't make a ton of money. Like, but when you have the whole summer off, like some of my fondest memories are literally just driving like an hour north, going to like a lake with my family, like, you
Yeah.
know, playing frisbee, or like, you know, my dad like picking up a log and being like, look at these fucking salamanders. And I was like, yeah, like
Yeah.
that's so impactful for a kid.
Yeah.
Is a kid going to think back to the 13th time they've been to Disney World? Maybe.
Yeah.
But how much does that shape their personality and their growth as an individual, as opposed to, you know, digging for that salamander? Like it, you know, like it's a little dirtier.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like constant thrills, but like I just
That
feel like that,
go
yeah,
ahead.
that versing in the real world, and
Mm.
um like shying away from super consumerist like vacations, I really do think that does something different to somebody.
Yeah. There's so much more value in things like especially in nature, dude, that you have a different kind of connection with the natural world, I think. And a lot
Mhm.
of the traveling that I did with my family was like national parks. I mean, like the majority of the traveling. Like we hadn't been on a vacation until last year. We only went on trips, if that makes sense. So like we
Yeah,
would do
yeah,
like national park trips, and like we've been I've been super fortunate to have been to like the majority of the big national parks out west and that kind of thing. But I think and that like is a different experience, like you're saying. I completely agree. Like the logs and the salamanders, bro, like that's different. Like that connection when you can see your parents make a connection with nature and the world in a way that doesn't require you to have money in order to do it. That's an interesting distinction. And also, like, not having enough time for my kids is a bullet point on the laundry list of worries that I have as I approach a career in business. And I think that's what kind of turns me on about being an entrepreneur, because no one's going to tell me I'm going to work for 80 hours a week. If I own my own company, maybe I could work super productively for 6 hours a day and be done. Like,
yeah.
that's sick.
I mean, that's why, like, dude, that thing about Disney World again, it's almost like there, for those people that do deify money, it's this thing where it's like, okay, you're trying to buy back the time that you could have just put in.
Mm.
You're trying to buy it back with this like ludicrously expensive or like elaborate vacation, where it's like, yeah, you could have just done the logs. But it's also like, for me, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think, like, based off of my own experiences, based off of talking to people, but also like learning about how humans really like develop, especially through childhood, like a hugely important thing is recognizing passion in those that we see as, you know, our role models, like our parents, our teachers, maybe a camp counselor that was impactful. But
Huge.
seeing that passion, like,
Mm.
I said that log thing for a reason. I've done 1,000,001 things in the Adirondacks with my parents, but that always sticks out to me because everywhere we went, my dad would make a huge fucking like thing about it, or like I could tell you exactly what part of a cattail is edible because that he's like, oh, like check this out, like this is so cool. You can like strip this off and then just munch on this. He's like, doesn't it taste like cucumber? It's like, it tastes like shit, Dad. But
But I still fucking eat it every time because it's cool that you know and you're my dad.
exactly. Yeah. It's because I love that energy. Like
Yeah.
having that kind of thing, like it's not the same when you're at Disney World and you go, oh, I really like Space Mountain.
Yeah.
That kid is not inspired by that. So it's like,
Yeah.
if you look at what are the most important things that we do as humans, it's engaging in like purposeful and fulfilling behavior. And in order to get on that path, you need to have a passion related to whatever it is that you're doing that's going to be purposeful, fulfilling, and like meaningful. Like, I guess the same thing as purposeful, but
Yeah.
know,
No. Two things on that. First of all, what's fun? Like some of the most expensive things are so cheap. Like
I think I know what you mean. Like it's so easy to get.
It's so cheap to buy a fucking Disney vacation.
Yeah.
And
that's beautiful verbiage. I love that.
Just to be clear, I love Disney and I've been twice. Once I don't remember, and the other time I went with my family.
Yeah.
And I like it a lot. Like I had fun there, but that's not as memorable, you know, as some of the other vacations I've taken. And so like it's not to knock Disney. It's like I'll probably bring my kids to Disney, bro. That place is magical. But like there's more important places to go first. And there's more things that I remember better about Disney or about other vacations other than Disney, you know? So like it's a cheap way to experience a vacation. It's like there's no I didn't learn anything at Disney. Like
don't you think there is something there though? Like I do think, because especially as a kid, we're like cerebral sponges. We're taking in everything. So somebody who is like, I'm talking all this shit about Disney, but like we would go every 2 years when I was younger, just because like my grandparents lived down there, so they'd be able to get like in-state ticket prices. So it was like mad cheap. But like I remember even as a little kid, like we would go to Disney and I was like, why don't we have like the Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse hats? How come that kid has a Buzz Lightyear blaster and I don't? Like, can we go to the store over there and I can get a big ass Mickey Mouse? And
yeah.
Right, but it teaches this weird kind of like perverse like glorification of capitalism, where you're just like, you see all of this surplus everywhere, like a big ass bag of popcorn. Do you think they don't give it to you because you're going to eat that much popcorn? It's about virtue signaling the idea that there is surplus, and this is somehow like utopia. Like the fact that they have all those futuristic like monorails that lead into the actual park and it's totally secluded. Like, we are crazy to not think that that's some kind of marketing scheme that is trying to brainwash the people that go there just a little bit. And I mean, that's not good business, but it's good business because they make a fuck ton of money. Like,
and that doesn't necessarily even mean that Disney is evil. You know, I think there is a lot of demonizing of big companies. And I think that Disney is an entertainment source. So it's kind of like you take it at face value. Like that is the embodiment of our American like media and our American tendencies, you know, like when you're there, like you said, and there's something like there are things wrong with that, I think, you know. And so it's kind of like, how often are you going to bring your kids to Disney? Like that's the thing. It's like, you don't, you know, like no, like it was for me, it was always no, you can't get Disney Mickey Mouse ears. Like, we'll go get ice cream like once today, not like 6 times every time we pass an ice cream thing, you know? So it's kind of like for my parents, and like, I think that they kind of were brought up in a way that like they were very like conservative with their money, you know? And so it's like, I think our parents' generation and their parents more specifically, just being closer to like generations above us are closer to the reality of a depression or, you know, right? So it's like saving money is like a joke in 2020. Like
Yeah.
saving money is like saving money. Like, well, like, what if my kid feels like shit because they see some other kid with Mickey Mouse ears? It's like, no, fuck you. Like, don't
Right.
fall. Like, you could like go and swim in the water without drinking it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Just swim, man.
we got to be smarter about what we're consuming. Because then you're right. Then you're encouraging, you know, the evil and the greed that comes with capitalism. You know, like we could really like take it down a notch.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think like I'm
My
like,
bad, dude. I kind of went on there for a minute.
no, you're good. I literally had it a second ago and I spilled something on me and it fucked me up. What was I gonna say?
I was just saying about you get it.
Like, okay, so the thing about like little kids, especially there, since they're always so competitive like that, like, because I mean, when you see that Mickey Mouse thing, it's not just like, you know, oh, I want that Mickey Mouse thing because it's cool. You only want it because everybody else has it.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, what you're talking about with like those previous generations having a really good idea of like what matters, what's important to spend money on, like the real value of money, the real value of saving. Like we haven't had any kind of major issue really that we've needed to save money for. And you could say that the like coronavirus pandemic has kind of done that, but like, has it really? No. Like,
People got a fucking stimulus check and bought weed.
yeah,
We're not worried about it.
yeah. I
You
mean,
know what I mean?
I'm not gonna lie, for a lot of people, like I bought weed with my stimulus check, but I'm also privileged. Like,
Yeah. No,
for
as
a
fuck,
lot of,
as fuck. And I know that that's a privileged statement to make, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, like, yeah, some people use that to feed their families. And, like, honestly, the stimulus check that a lot of people our age received probably shouldn't have even gone to us because it could have helped somebody else more. And we're in it, you know, so it's like,
yeah,
that's the thing though. Like exactly, it still contributes to that point. It's like we're getting a false sense of security with the way that the money's being handled and the way that we see our idols consume products.
I
Like,
think that is really the core of it because like in the past there was not like the social media culture of how are you spending your money, like this person is like flexing. Was that really a term up until recently? Like
yeah,
I don't think so. And I mean, when you're talking about like widespread, I don't know, rebuking of a tradition, like saving your money, getting ready for the next war, getting ready for the next recession, like canning your food, having a garden, all those things, like there are cultural factors at play that are really affecting that. So like,
yeah,
I think you're hitting the nail on the head saying that when we watch our idols like the Kardashians, like Kanye, when we watch literally any Instagram influencer who's like, go buy my $70 leggings that will make your butt look a little bit bigger. Like, that's all shit that's like signaling to us, oh, if I want to be successful, I have to do this thing. And like,
yeah, yeah. And there's a lack of empathy in our culture that is plaguing us. So this goes back to what I was gonna say earlier. I kind of lost it, but you were saying like in your upbringing, like there's a level of empathy that comes with like looking under the log for salamanders. Like there's a level of like existing with your environment and understanding the nature and the force of the world that you don't get when you go to Disney World, you
right.
know? And so I think it like maybe doesn't exactly relate to that salamander thing, but it was more about what you were saying. The reason I was thinking of it more about what you were saying, just about like the environment that affects an upbringing of a kid. So you were saying like in Disney, like you see all of the romanticism of the American, like not dream, but the American way, and the way that the
Yeah.
popcorn's big, and you get a
Yes.
fucking,
Yeah.
you get a $15 ice cream that has a Mickey Mouse shape, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, well, you know, if we can teach people to care about other people instead of, like, if they cared about how someone was feeling instead of how someone was viewing them from the outside, you know, like if I was a little kid and I was in Disney and I didn't have the Mickey Mouse ears, maybe I'd be worried about the other kid thinking that I'm like not as good as him because he's got the Mickey Mouse ears. But if I was a little kid and I was fucking playing with frogs in the river,
Yeah.
I'm not worried about shit.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
You
and
want to
that
be a friend of frog.
you
Yeah.
want to be with the frogs. Like, you're chilling with the frogs, and there's a mutual understanding there where you're like, okay, these are fucking frogs, but like they're
Yeah.
living, and like I'm thinking of like a camping trip I went on with my family, like, and there's mad frogs in the river, and we're catching frogs, and you're looking at them, and you got to be nice to them because they might die if you're not, and like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like it's an
Yes.
empathy thing. It's like when you're involved in and like surrounded by nature, then you start to understand like that it's a more reasonable view of how you should interact with other living things.
Yes. And that's the biggest thing, the living thing part, because nothing at Disneyland is a living thing. Also, that person inside the mascot might not be a living thing. They might go home and drink 12 beers every night just so they can fall asleep because they think their life's hell. Like, dude, what you're saying about like the frog thing. So I live in this like small neighborhood that has a stream that runs behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who are listening and wondering, like, okay, yeah, you guys are talking about like building empathy and all that. Well, how does that really fucking translate? Like, how do you?
My bad.
Well, no, I just mean like, how do you teach that lesson? Like,
Yeah.
you said about the frogs, like you have to be careful with them, or like they'll get sad and die, or just like run away, like all that. Like I remember when I was a kid, and one of my friends like had lived kind of near like the swampy area that like fed the stream behind our neighborhood. So we would go back there with like little mason jars and like some caps, maybe one of those like bug catcher kits you get at like Toys R Us. And this stream had hella crayfish, and I had like never caught crayfish before.
Mm.
Uh, and I remember like the first time I tried doing it, they were like, all right, all right, all right. So what you got to do is you got to just reach under that rock, pull it up, and they're all going to scurry out. And then you just got to like try and get as many as you can.
Yeah.
And like thinking back to that, like I remember how terrified I was at the thought of some little thing with claws. Like I'm reaching into something
Mm-hmm.
that's unknown. So I just have to trust these other people who I don't really know that well. Like, especially as a kid who was
Yeah.
like riddled with anxiety and like irrational fears. It was just like, I learned like, oh, okay, like I can reach into the unknown and I'm not going to need to fear anything because like it either happens or it doesn't. Like I don't know how many times we went like crayfish hunting or fishing, collecting,
Yeah.
and maybe got like snipped once.
Yeah.
Like, but you also learn like you drop that rock for the first time and you see a crayfish get stuck like right on the end, and you see it like wiggling around and it just fucks you up.
Yeah.
That's where that empathy comes from, because you have like it is very hard for people to learn from things that are outside of their own personal lens. Like, you know, think about when we give advice to people, it almost always comes through a personal lens, because one of the hardest things to do in life is to totally get yourself out of, you know,
Yeah.
your worldview, get yourself out of your car and hop in the passenger seat of somebody else's car. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so the way that that like implicitly builds those strong values of like you were saying, empathy, like understanding, beating fears, all of that, it's doing it through these little lessons where the stakes are very low, but you
Yeah.
do make fuck ups and then you immediately see the results of it. And it's like, I mean, you could say I was just lucky that like I didn't have a larger fuck up that I had to learn from, but I really do think growing up around nature and in it can really help to afford those opportunities rather than it being something that you make later on in life.
It's just a more direct pathway to understanding yourself
Yeah.
than any material item could possibly present you, because it's so it's as old as time. I mean, our interaction with nature has and always will be like the first thing that we ever did as humans, so it's like our interaction with our computer screen might make us like anxious and stressed, and like our interaction with a fucking frog or a crayfish like might make us empathetic. And it's really interesting. Like, also something that I think is interesting too, and maybe you have like some sort of principle to apply to this as a psychology major, but I did a similar thing with like crabs at the beach. So I live on the Cape, and I would go to the beach. My parents, like I said, are teachers, so we would be at the beach if we weren't on vacation, like in the summer. You all right? More
Sorry,
okay?
it needs more. Yeah, it needs more orange juice.
So like we would spend like from 9 in the morning until like 4 in the afternoon at the beach, and it would be just like fuck off, like not fuck off, but like find something to do, like you're here now, and so like we would go crabbing the whole day. So like you're saying with the crayfish thing, it's like Alden and I would just sit there and wait for low tide to get there, and then we just flip rocks, and there are the crabs. It's something interesting. What do you think that is, that's like, as humans, we like to interface with and dominate and understand like things that are of a lower intelligence than us. Like we would catch crabs and look at them and play with them, and like sometimes we get pinched, but like we never really wanted to hurt them. Like,
Right.
what is that?
I don't need, dude. I don't even think. I think it's socialization. When you're young, how broad is your, sphere of awareness, right? Adults are cut off to you because they're like this whole other thing. Like you can talk to like some kids, but like, while you're growing up, some kids are below you, like in terms of like development. Other kids are a little above you. It's like hard to find that like range where you're like, we're really get along with this kid. Like we play the same kind of make believe, whatever. But like with animals, like almost all kids who have some kind of like um mental disability, like autism, or like I don't know, a developmental disorder that like might inhibit their socialization with other humans,
Mm-hmm.
they almost always have really good relations with like animals. And it's shown that like therapy animals really do help those kids to gain better social skills. So I think like as children, right, we're less hardened by the world. We haven't had our perception of things as narrowed in as like even at like 20. Our perception's pretty narrowed. Like we're not looking around at everything and going, oh wow, like this tree's incredible, the brick pattern on this building is blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
But as kids, you're just like, what the fuck? A wrought iron gate? I've never seen that before. That's nuts. Or like a squirrel or a crab. And I think there's some kind of socialization that happens there when you're interacting with another living thing. But that might be horseshit.
No, don't do that. I think I noticed, I was listening back, and just so everyone who's listening like knows, we do listen back to these, and like I found myself kind of discounting what I was saying after I said it because I was worried about the way I was going to be perceived. And like I think that's something we have to stop doing, because we try to be like our most authentic self, and like
Shit's hard.
I think you're right, and so it's like that kind of thing. It's like I think that just comes with like getting more comfortable with doing this and being open to what people think about it,
Yeah.
Not that
I
we
just
got
like, I know sometimes I speak in a certain tone that makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about. Or at least people have told me that. But then I know I'm speaking falsities. So it's like,
but Nate, but maybe you're not speaking falsities right now. Maybe you're just speaking like an idea, and maybe it's not right, but it's still like the way that you perceive the world. And I think that adds value to people. That adds value to people's perspective,
true,
So
true.
I want to know two things. First of all, what the fuck can we do to widen our perspective? Because that seems like the key, and
Look to
also,
nature. 100%.
What's that? Going to nature?
Look to nature.
100%.
Mushrooms, DMT, like, yeah, acid laboratory, but
And for anyone who doesn't want to fucking take psychedelics,
walk.
go on a walk.
Yeah.
Right. Walk through the woods. Like, and so it doesn't, so it's like, okay, I completely agree with you there. And I think the second thing I was going to say is this really ties into our experiment
Oh, yeah.
with channeling different streams of consciousness and understanding how other people perceive the world. Do you think we should get into that?
Why not? I mean, yeah. So we've been well, what's the question first so that we can like bridge that gap and be done with that? You know what I mean?
With what?
You said that the second part was like, oh, you just mean how does it relate to like the flow state?
My fault. It was just a second comment that said, like, I think that this could tie in well to the flow state because, and then I didn't really say because I don't know why I didn't say it, but I guess because like
those 9% beers are already getting like,
yeah, listen, yeah, I'm there.
those
Yeah.
shits are hefty.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's like, the perception of like the way that we see the world and the way that like we channel certain, like the reason I brought this up is like you were saying, a narrow perspective where it's like your perspective is hardened to a smaller level. And something that I had written in my journal that hopefully by the time this comes out, people will have already had the chance to read on our Instagram account, Blissfully Unaware Podcast. Please follow it if you want. I said something about the perspective that it gives you to like channel a stream of consciousness that is completely opposite of your own, and the benefits of that, and it just makes you a more it zooms you out. And that's something I write about is like I think that it's so important to be at a level where like let me pull up what I had written because I actually really liked it. I had written
Yeah.
it said I wrote let's see this might not like be as good right now. I had written it last night, but let me see.
Was this so this was for your what, 5th day or 6th?
No, this was like earlier in the process of channeling pessimism. And I had written like, okay, wait, let's see.
Here, let's do the background on this real quick.
Yeah, help me out.
On the last podcast.
We talked about it briefly, but I think we should go into it a little more since we've had a full week of trying to channel it and develop and understand it.
Yeah. So, okay. So I've been trying to do like just increase like optimism, looking for like the best in everything. And like, obviously that sounds like not that hard. But for somebody who always looks at the world like extremely cynically, like, okay, what are the issues in this? Training myself to not do that was like wicked hard. I mean, I noticed that there was a lot of times where I was like, I was going up to like a gas station and I was like, I really got to pay like $25 in gas. But then it was just like, okay, all right, like, why am I thinking about it that way? Like, it could just be, well, I'm really lucky that I can pay for this gas right now. Like, I'm blessed that like my car didn't break down. Like, it's dope that I didn't have to like push my car an extra 5 miles to get it to like some kind of gas station, whatever.
Or you could be Hale and pay $50 to fill your tank.
$50?
Yeah, well,
the silver bullet is that much?
Closer to 40 now with the oil prices lower, but yeah, and last summer, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got to get a Prius.
Yeah, I won't. But I don't hate you for the Prius. In high school, I would have hated you for the Prius, but that's some pussy shit, man.
Yeah.
I think the Prius.
You know what? Everybody hated me for the Prius in high school. It's whatever.
Fuck that.
Dude, the gas mileage, ridiculous.
So
I love
it. It's ridiculous. So listen to this. It's a practicality thing. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I found what I had written, and let me know if this resonated with the way like this really was this thing that I had written down was a product of a perspective that I did not normally pursue. And so let me know if this resonates with you. I wrote, there is something light and sharp about the bird's eye view. A walk around town might show you the trash on the street, but the view from the mountain will show you the heart of the city.
Mhm.
So it's like, when you see everything, like something I found is that pessimism allowed me to see a broader picture, where I felt that optimism sometimes only looking at the positive shielded me from some of the things that I needed to see to have a better perspective, a lighter perspective. You know, there's like a certain freedom in understanding the whole picture
Yeah.
that I found when I channeled the pessimism, you know, and that's something that was really, like you said, really fucking hard for me too. Like, if you see, you know, like I was up with Carolyn on the top of a mountain. It was like a hill over a town in Western Mass, and I could see the whole town, you know, and you could see cars moving, but you couldn't see all of the small, like, troublesome pieces of the town. All you could see was a town with people working and functioning together, you know, and there's like a certain clarity to that kind of view. And I think when you challenge yourself to move into a new perspective, you have the ability to see at a level that is just, like you said earlier, like it's not so constricted. It's so freeing to see at that broad range.
Bro, I couldn't agree with that more. Like I felt like a large part of trying to be positive was living presently. And like I feel like in my day-to-day life, I that thing you're saying about a zoomed out view, that's kind of how I feel like I approach most things. Like naturally it's just like, oh well, like I can't really enjoy this because da 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 da, you
Mm.
know. But like trying to channel optimism, it definitely felt like I was more so living in the moment. It was easier to joke around about stuff. Like I didn't feel like I was like, whoa, like I gotta be conscious about all these like other things. So like the fact that like obviously no one system is great. And like the unity that we always talk about, like the real like blessing of this like experiment is going to be trying to find that sweet spot in the middle that allows us to one have that perspective but make peace with it and still be present and optimistic in that time where it's like
Yeah.
I can't really do anything about that thing right now, so I just need to let it
Mm.
be and exist, and it'll still be there once I'm ready to deal with it. But
And for me, on the other side, it's, you know, maybe I can't deal with that thing right now, but don't be a fucking moron and pretend it's not there. Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and that's my side of our thing. And I had told Carolyn about our experiment, and she was like, well, that's not really good for you. Like channeling pessimism, like optimism, you know, that's a pretty good thing to channel, but channeling pessimism, that's not like great for you. But I was like, well, maybe not at first you might not think so, you know. Like obviously that's not how I am. And like I think I was worried about it too. Like I was like, okay, what if I kind of get like stuck in this pattern, you know, and like this isn't the way that I choose to see the world. And but I found that there is a freedom that comes with and it really has value, you know. And I think that taking a chance to, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, you know, I am so fucking pessimistic, like, god damn it, I hate everything. Like, if you just take a chance, like, and we try to do like 4 hours a day, but even if you chose 20 minutes
yeah,
to stop what you're doing, don't look at a screen, don't open your eyes, just close your eyes and think about for 4 minutes, like, I'm going to be optimistic about every thought that enters my head for the next 20 minutes.
yeah.
I think it would be fucking absolutely unbelievable what you would learn about yourself and the way that you see the world. And I think same goes for if an optimistic person chooses to be pessimistic. You
Right.
know, it has real value in it. And I think that's the reason we were excited about it, because we knew it was going to.
Yeah. And this is also just like, this is the surface, like purely the
Yeah.
fact that like we happen to see the world through these views. Like this is probably the easiest like set of things we could have done it with.
And it
Pessimism.
was so hard, but it was
Yeah.
the easiest. Yeah.
Multiple times through that 4 hour period, like I would just be like, I'd have like an interaction with somebody at like Like I was at a pizza store and I was like, oh, like I'm feeling really good. Like everything's great here. Like it's 20 minutes that I have to wait for a slice, but like I don't mind because I can just like catch up on like emails and stuff. Or like taking the great decor of this like hometown like pizza place. But there's so much opportunity to get like pissed off during that time for me, or so much opportunity to like look out the window and see something. And since I'm in that flow state where it's easy to get into of just cynicism or like pessimism, like I see some homeless guy who's pushing his cart along the street and I go, well, fuck, that's gross that we allow that to happen. And I can't believe that people voted for somebody who's not gonna like, help them. Like obviously that's resolved now, but like homelessness isn't, but is it bullshit?
We'll see if Biden fixes that. I'm pretty happy Trump didn't win. I'm not sure I'm happy that Biden won, but
In all fairness, I don't think any real progressive loves the fact that Biden is in.
Yeah,
Like we're not gonna go dive
we
deep.
did it. We've been there, but no, we agree. Listen, something I think interesting that you just said is if I was in a pizza shop, like I'm pretty impatient, so I get antsy and shit, but like in general, I think that it proves that it was almost like we were window shopping instead of like in the store feeling the clothes. Like you weren't channeling an optimistic flow state, because if you were, then you wouldn't even think about the fact that you were forcing that flow state, right? So it's like when I'm in that flow state of optimism, which is the way, like pretty much where I'm like where I reside, like I don't think about how tiring it is to be there. Like I'm already there, and so that's why we think, and correct me if this isn't how you think, but I'm pretty sure this is, like, that's why we think this is such a cool idea, because we tried to tap into it, but we were like on the glass, like looking in, right? So I was like looking.
So hard.
It's so fucking hard.
Like if anybody wants to try this, literally
Please try it.
you need to change every aspect of the way you think, because like understand the fact that every single neural connection that you have right now, it's almost like coded with this layer of personality that you've been practicing for however long you've been doing it. Like
it's that fucking entrenched route of your synaptic clefts, bro, like we talked about earlier, bro. It's a snowball. It's a fucking
like realistically, like if we wanted to do this experiment on like a really, I guess, provable level, or just like really get results, we would probably have to do this shit for like 6 months. Like there's no way a week is enough for us to really understand this. But I really do like the practice of this. And something that I've been trying to do in the past 2 days is spend a lot of time. So I've been, Hale mentioned like how music has an insanely powerful effect on your mood, which like you can use to kind of channel this like new flow state that whatever it is you're going for. For the last 2 days, I've been trying to do that with like just like pure sadness, like see how sad I can make myself to try and get to a level, because like I have people in my life who maybe deal with like a really entrenched sadness flow state. And I really, really want to get a better understanding of what that's like so that I can help more. I mean, I deal with sadness in my life. Like, I have depressive episodes like everybody, but like to be able to really feel like, oh, like there's nothing here. Like, how do you relate to that? And I feel like clinically that could help me in the future if I can figure that out now. So for anybody that like really wants to hop on board that, I think you hit it on the head with 20 minutes. Do the music, surround yourself with almost nothing when you're first doing it. But then once you're ready, go out into the real world and start interacting with people. And that's going to be some of the best ways for you to see if it's working or not.
And I would recommend that you pick an area that you're bad at. Like, and you might not see it as being bad at it, but maybe you see it as just something that you don't focus on, like it could be literally anything. It could be something as broad as pessimism or optimism, or it could also be a political leaning. It could be a devil's advocate position. It could be, it could be 100 different things. It could be an emotion. It could be, anything that you think you could really benefit from seeing the other side of. And I think what you're saying, Nate, is like, it's just so important to look into and begin to feel another perspective, because it makes you a better person. It makes you more empathetic, like we were talking about, and it just, it adds value to yourself so that you can add value to other people.
Yeah, I think like that's a huge point of things that we've like stressed on this podcast before, but also in our conversations off the podcast, talking about breaking your biology like that. It's like we are made to not be selfless. We should be selfish creatures because that's the best way to reproduce and pass on our genes.
Right.
But to break our biology and
Mm.
become empathetic like that and become selfless, like that's
Right.
the best fucking thing we can do. So it's almost like a step on the spiritual path of like that kind of like, soul evolution rather than like, feeding the ego
Yeah.
is stepping out of that normal path. Like break your biology and don't think how you would normally think. Because then it just makes you more plastic.
Yeah.
Like,
Even if you are defining yourself as a category that people have told you is a good thing to define yourself as, like optimism. Like there's
yeah.
not value in only being optimistic. There's not. I'm sorry. Like, and that's a harsh reality of the world. It's like things aren't like that black and white. Like you need to see those other perspectives to, like you're saying, add value to your take on the world.
You know what okay. I just thought of an experiment like that might not be, it could be harmful potentially. So before I say this, I am not like, I'm not hoping that anybody does this or thinks that this is like a word of admission, but what would happen if you took a really potent acid dose and tried to do this kind of channeling of flow state? Because like that, especially, I feel like LSD is so introspective compared to like any other kind of psychedelic. If you really, well, not compared to mushrooms or like, or yeah, compared to mushrooms, I feel like acid's way more introspective. So it'd be better like if you could really, really focus on with you being more like cynical or like pessimistic, like what would that do to you afterwards? And since there's so many neural openings that are going on when you're tripping, would it be like you just kind of gain a new trait?
Yeah, a new pathway for the perspective of your world. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be incredible. That's something we should try, and we're not going to encourage anybody else to try, but we'll let you know. Listen, let's open up with somebody just started showering, so it might be loud. Let's open it up with why we want to do this.
Well, I mean, like we both, I feel like, listen to a few podcasts. Like I feel like I listen to a lot of podcasts. Like, of course, I listen to Joe Rogan, but I also listen to like a psych podcast. I listen to like Tom Segura's podcast. I listen to like, I don't even know. Like sometimes I'll just find ones that like interest me. So it's like it's really like an art form that we both like, but also every fucking time that like, especially when we smoke, I feel like we have good conversations where we go somewhere and I walk away going, oh, like I definitely just learned something. So it's like, how valuable would it be to be able to give that to somebody else? Maybe that experience of observing and almost partaking in that conversation with us, maybe people can learn a little something from it, whether it be what not to do or what to do. But
Yeah, I think that's very much in line with the reason that I enjoy doing this. I think that Nate and I started doing this because we both were just like
had a couple of drunk or crossed conversations, and we're like, okay, like maybe we should like really be recording this, you know, not because we thought like we were like the shit, but because like you said, like we don't think we're the shit, and like the
Yeah.
way that you know that we don't think we're the shit, or the way that you might be able to understand, is like when we, you know, go back on something that we said, or like, you know, like kind of defend it or that kind of thing. Like we really don't think that highly of ourselves, that like
I think it's evident in how self-conscious we are constantly.
and I think that's got to go away to an extent, because like it might take away from, because you've said that, like you just said, like you've said this to me, I've said this to you, it's like when we do that, it takes away from our message, because like, you know, like I think what people like, I think that if people listen to this enough and start to understand us better, like they'll understand like who we are. And I think that's the most, like that's the best part about a podcast, is getting to feel like you know the person who's like talking in your ear, you know, like you know what they believe in, you know their likes, you know their dislikes, and it gives you a perspective, like you said. And I think that that's really what Nate and I are shooting for here. It's like let's just give our perspective out, and maybe it'll be beneficial to somebody else. And like selfishly, this is beneficial to us too, because every time I do this, I feel like there it is, that's my session for the week. Like, and I like
It's like it's
huge.
cognitive therapy almost.
100%. And honestly, please, if you're watching this, like have a fucking conversation with somebody who gets you. Like
Yeah.
it'll change your shit. Like you'll be like, you'll feel such a sense of relief, and like that somebody could listen to to the way that you perceive the world, and understand like that connection. I think that Nate and I have, like that I feel when I listen to you talk, and I feel that you reciprocate when I speak to you. It's like there's something that's so fucking wholesome about that, that I appreciate so much, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And because of that, it's like there's this beautiful thing. Like we we discussed this before. Like we our foundations are very similar, but the way in which we think is pretty different. So it's like it's this beautiful thing where it's like I could go on this weird kind of tangent or like tangential thinking where it's like, oh, I have some kind of preconceived notion. But then you're like, well, wait, like what about this? And it's like, oh, like I was wrong. Or it's like it's just like great. It's great to have that second perspective. Like, yeah.
It's so cool to be wrong.
Yeah. It
We
really
should
is because it makes you think so much more about everything.
we should
Imagine
really
if you're right all the
what,
time.
what's that?
Imagine if you're right all the time.
Fuck that. We should normalize being wrong and admitting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why can't we normalize admitting when we're wrong? I think that like, and I've said this to Nate before, we haven't talked about this on the podcast, right? It was a text message I sent you.
I don't think so, no.
Here's an interesting perspective that I value like really, really fucking highly. And I think this is because of past relationships I've had with other people. It's like, I think that there is the truest form of honesty is admitting that you're wrong, because you have to give up so much of your own ego and
Right.
sacrifice your perspective almost, because like in order to admit that you were wrong about something. I think that that's like a it's so fucking hard for people to do. And I think if we were better at that, like the last podcast, if y'all watched that one, like Nate said something and I was like, yeah, I was being ignorant as fuck just then. Like, what did I even just say? And I didn't say that out loud, but I did take back what I said. I was like, hi, shit. I was like, yo, I think I'm wrong. But like, that is something that like, I'm not good at doing that all the time either, especially in relationships that are different from Nate and I's. Like my relationship with Carolyn, like it's harder when you're with somebody that you like care about the most, right? To admit that you're wrong. And I think that that's where there's damage. Like, that's where there's damage to be done on a psychological level. Like when you have a family member that's been
Yeah.
raising you, or that's been your older brother or younger brother, and they won't admit when they're wrong about something, and it's so hard to do it on that end, and I think it's so much harder, in my opinion, to receive that lie,
Yeah,
that lack of honesty from somebody who you care about so much.
bro. Okay. So this brings me to like the whole thing about like identity bias. So
Mhm.
like there is this really interesting thing that happens to us where we start to identify ourselves as certain things. Like we've talked about this before with the whole thing of like, if you have somebody who identifies themselves as like, and I mean like self identity, not just how other people perceive them, but what you hold to be central, like facets of
Mhm.
yourself,
Yeah.
those are things that your body and your brain do not want to let go. If you always consider yourself the strongest person in the room, your body and brain is going to do everything possible to make sure that stays it. Like you will be the strongest person in the room. You're gonna find that drive to go hit the gym a little extra harder. You're gonna find that drive to give just a little bit more in like practice, or when you're like just wrestling your buddy if you're supposed to be like, that dude. So like with the whole thing about being wrong or right, I think that plays into it so much. Um, I think about like my family. My dad, super smart guy, right? But even
Same.
the smartest person fucks up like often. So for him, it's like this decided dance of his self identity is he is normally right. Like, oh, I'm the voice of reason. I normally have the facts. So it's like, what happens to that person when they don't have all of the facts? It's so hard for them because they're betraying what they determine as their self identity. And that is something that shakes the pillars of what you are. So it's like, uh, for example, like a few weeks ago, I went home when I was still at school, um, and I was seeing some friends from home, and we were just dicking around. We got high, then we were inside, and like people were like playing like guitars and stuff. And I guess like I normally define myself as like I think I make the right decision a lot of the times. I don't normally think of myself as somebody who's like, oh, I just do shit super impulsively. Um, but then I go ahead and I throw a water bottle at one of my friends, and it breaks the siding of the guitar, and there's this big fucking hole in it. And my immediate reaction was just like, oh, why didn't you move the guitar? Like I said to you, like catch like 3 times, just catch it. And it's like, no, that is not the right response on my part. And like it was fucked up, but like I've been friends with all those people forever. So it was like, okay, like water under the bridge, whatever. Like I paid for it and everything. But
Yeah.
walking home from it that night, it was like, I felt so weird. I felt this like intense guilt and like sense of almost like betrayal of self. Um,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
I also like I feel like I should do the right thing. That's like a huge thing for me. It's like, oh, I should be doing the right thing. Like I've prided myself so much on not giving into the ego. And then in that moment, I was entirely egotistical. Like it was merely just to preserve my own sense of self within that group or within that immediate situation. And it's like that intense feeling of guilt that you have, it's because you're fully giving into something that is not your soul. It's just that shitty ego of, oh, I don't want to be wrong, like, oh, I don't want to admit I fucked up. But like it's so much harder to just deal with like that lie to yourself than it is to really say like, oh, hey, I fucked up, sorry about that, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, and I think that that's like the second that you do something wrong, I think people will really relate with that, because the second that you do something wrong, there's such a tendency to just like throw walls up. Like, oh, fuck
Yes.
you. What? Why didn't you fucking move your guitar, dick? Like,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, like everyone that's listening to this has been guilty of that at some point. And I think, like you said, on your walk home, like there's a level of um disappointment that you have with yourself, because oftentimes I find myself saying, it's those 9%ers, man. I find myself saying, like, I would never act that way in that situation, you know? And so when you act that way in that situation,
Yeah.
it's a level of disappointment that you have to be honest with yourself to feel, you know? Like, and when you are honest with yourself and you feel that level of disappointment, that sucks. I mean, that is like a heavy ass weight to carry when you are like, man, I fucked up. I know I fucked up. And even if it's a $60 guitar repairman, like to the fucking neck of the guitar because some bullshit chipped away, it's like, yeah, but like the fucking ego that I just threw into that situation is like, you know, and it's neat. Like I'm talking about your example, but I have examples of this too where I've been like, oh, that's on you. Like, and it's
Yeah.
just like, man, like that sucks to that regret is so powerful. And I think that's why, like, there's a song called That's on Me by Mac Miller. And it's like,
Yeah.
I've played this for you before after we've smoked, and that's like pretty much like where I realized that I believe in this so much. And you know, it's like in the song he just admits his faults, and
Right.
it's so simple, you know. But for him, what do you think it took for him to make a song like that, where he just like the quote is like the whole chorus is like, that's on me, I know. Like, I know, like, I look at you and I fucked up some part of your life and I say, oh my God, I know, like, that's on me. Like,
Bro, that had to have been so healing for him though, because like
yes.
you can kind of hear it. Like it that disappointment that you talk about, like there is nothing worse than having
Mm,
disappointment in yourself, because then it's like, okay, this is an imposed, like your parent gets disappointed in you, it's so easy to dismiss that. Like
mm, mm-hmm.
they're just trying to make sure that like, oh, like, you know, I'm doing the right thing, whatever. That's just their code. Like that's just how you feel, man. But if you're like, oh, okay, I've now done something that's transgressed against my own like morals, that's fucking so powerful. And in that song by Mac, you can tell so fully that like I don't know the history behind the song. I don't know if you do, but like you can tell it is something that probably was like a major fuck up where it's like this is his coming to terms with that. And like, dude, it's masterfully made. Like I love when a song like that not only conveys so much emotion, but can really teach you like a lesson.
Mm,
Because so much I feel of the media that I consume doesn't teach me lessons. It's just entertainment, right? Like,
yeah.
but it's like, you know,
You get
entertainment
that
is
extra
really,
value.
right, exactly. Entertainment's really just another drug. Like it,
Mm-hmm.
I forget who I was having this conversation. Maybe we were having this conversation. I don't remember, but the whole thing about everything being drugs.
That
Um,
wasn't me, but
okay,
yeah,
all right,
that
yeah,
makes sense.
I really believe that.
Mm,
Fucking, if you think about it, like all that really matters chemically is that everything's a drug. Like obviously, like
yeah,
entertainment is like you're getting this little serotonin boost. Sports are, you're getting this weird kind of like sense of accomplishment, and you really aren't accomplishing anything. Yeah, you're scoring a touchdown, you're not really doing anything. Like video games do the same thing. Um, you know, running does the same thing with the runner's high. Like that's a drug. Like yeah,
yeah.
it's endogenous, but it's still a release. Like food, whatever.
It's simple, dude.
I don't
It's
know where I'm going with this, but
I know where you're going with this. Let me just bring you home here,
all
brother.
right, let's do it.
You're going in the route of, and I'm trying not to yell because my fucking roommates are all sleeping right now. But can you still hear me okay like this?
Yeah, yeah,
You're going to a place of like it's just, and correct me if I'm wrong, um, it's a simpler version of your emotions where you are um what's the word? You are satisfied by simple things that we used to be satisfied as, like when we were much younger in our evolution, like a competitive advantage or an advantage in intelligence, and like, and that's kind of, I think, where the simplicities start to fall into line of like realizing how simple we are as humans and just using that to your advantage, right? So it's like, that you as a person, Nate, have a high drive for being competitive and athletic, right? And that just falls into your DNA, right? So it's like
Right.
that strokes your ego kind of thing, right? Where it's like, okay, like I can be competitive in this kind of like rugby, like you and I, like, like you see rugby as a place to insert your dominance as a fucking athlete. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that is like a true, simple form of us, And I think something that like we were going back to that music thing, like, music is like music is so good because it can be mindless, right? But when it's
Yeah.
not mindless, it has an additional level of stimulation, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
when it makes you think about um the consequence, like, it's when its consequences are affecting you, that's you have a different depth and connection to that music.
That friend I was talking about whose guitar I fucked up, we were hanging out the other night, and so he's a music major, and he spends probably 8 hours a day practicing instruments. And he was talking to me. He was giving me this whole like lecture on active listening to music, and
Mm-hmm.
um, he goes as far as to shut off lights and make sure he's not experiencing any other stimulus except just the music. And I mean, obviously he's taken all kinds of music theory classes, so understands like chord progressions and whatever at like a deeper level. So
Right.
he was saying, like, if you're really like actively listening to music, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Where like you're taking in everything about it. There are lessons at every single turn when you intuitively understand it, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you understand like why this artist made this decision. So this one change in like how they're strumming their guitar, like, okay, that could teach you something else. And like I low-key wish I had that kind of like ability to really interpret that much or glean that much from the like whatever kind of music I'm listening to. Um, but like I just don't have that perspective. So when an artist kind of like lays it out a little bit easier, like it's beautiful because it's like I'm taking that shortcut to it. And I mean, there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that shortcut. Um,
Oh, no.
yeah,
I think you have it, like, I think as somebody, I think that your passions in life allow you to take shortcuts
yeah,
to understanding things more quickly. So let me give you an example. Like, you are passionate about understanding how people think, right? A psychology major, and you want to help, like maybe be a therapist for people. Like,
yeah,
you're passionate about that, and that allows you to understand that subject better, And so I think that's a shortcut. Like, that's not, shortcuts kind of have a negative connotation, but like, because your passion lies in that area, like, you have more energy and commitment to understanding that segment of life, right? So it's like,
bro, I really like that.
yeah,
I really like that idea because you're right. Shortcuts do get demonized constantly.
yeah, because it's the easy way out, right? But sometimes it's not the easy way out. Sometimes
Right.
it's where your passion lies. And I think like, this is getting away from the idea of passion, but like, weed is an absolute shortcut into understanding music. I mean, that's got to be one of the truest things that I accept in my world, is that like, I do not understand a song as I will never understand a song as well as I do as when I'm high. Like, I'm sorry, I won't. And when I do, like, it has such an impact on me where I'm really happy with my sober life, and there's almost nothing that I say I wish I was high for that. But there is music that plays that I say I wish I was high to listen to this right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a shortcut, and it's not a passion shortcut. It's a different shortcut. It's a chemical advantage, and it gives you like it, like I said, like, you're feeling that sweatshirt instead of looking at it through the window. Like,
Right. Okay, so this is bringing it full circle. Our talk about drugs, passions, whatever, like the fact, like not just drugs, like that everything is a drug. It
mm,
like those passion and the fact that we've talked so much about like synaptic pathways. With passion, it's this thing of you're just always thinking about it. You're diverting a
yeah,
ton of energy into it. You're diverting a ton of like brain power. Is
mm,
in its own sense like, you know, some kind of like performance enhancing drug where, you know, if you passionately think about one thing, you are creating a brain structure that more easily lends you to that thing. Like,
yeah,
like,
100%.
right? Like, yeah, you're all about business. So it just kind of works in your mind. Like, yes, make connections with people. Like, yes, think about what people like want, need, like at these different moments, because not only is that marketable, but also
Mm,
like that's how you network. Like it's all of that. And that's something that like could be difficult for somebody else. Or like, you
right,
know, I
absolutely.
yeah, I really do think like so Oregon decriminalized all drugs recently.
Yeah, we wanted to talk
Maybe
about this.
maybe that's on the right path because like this whole thing where we're demonizing shortcuts, are certain drugs shortcuts that we have demonized only because they make it a little bit easier?
Hmm.
Granted, there are like, I'm not shitting on the face of science right now, there are noted issues with a lot of hard drugs, but
Yeah,
if we're just talking about like psychedelics for example,
yeah,
which are obviously shortcuts. Like there's some lessons I've learned in my life that I may have not learned until I was in my 30s or later, um, purely because I took that psychedelic shortcut earlier on. Uh,
yeah, yeah. Dude, and just for some background for people who don't know, Oregon is legalized, or let's be correct here about this, decriminalized
decriminalized possession.
possession of all drugs, right? So this is like a state where you can literally have any drug on you in your to a specific amount where you don't have intent to distribute, correct? So
The intent to distribute, like that whole thing was also rehauled in a certain respect. So intent to distribute, now they have to have like beyond solid proof. Um, I don't know how that's gonna translate to a courtroom,
do you mean other than in terms of quantity?
other than in terms of quantity. Because like, well, for the longest time, like New York City, you could carry like what, um, a gram or two of like weed. But if you had like an ounce, oh, you must be a supplier. It's like, no, man, I just like to smoke a lot of weed. It's
Yeah,
like,
fuck you.
but in the eyes of the law, that's intent to distribute. So I
Yeah,
think
what, I can walk around with a 30 rack, but I can't have a fucking ounce of weed. Fuck you. Yeah.
exactly.
And so here's something really interesting that I want your perspective on. I called my parents up. I was like,
Yeah.
it's like, mom and dad, like, you hear about Oregon? They're like, what's going on with Oregon, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, they're not fucking with that. I mean, they're not fucking with that, but I will give them credit. Like, they were something that I respect about my parents being Republicans who have been Republicans their whole life is that they are willing to have that conversation and they value the conversation, and that's the most important thing that anyone could ask for. It's just that, like, you listen and then you respond, right? And so I was like, so what do you guys think, and like, they clearly it was apparent to me that they knew a lot less about the psychedelic thing, right? They didn't know much about the involvement of psychedelics in battling mental health and PTSD and MDMA and that kind of thing that we've been kind of like following. And if you haven't looked at that, like, there was something recently approved to use MDMA, correct? MDMA for
Yeah.
battling PTSD, which is fucking beautiful.
And major depressive disorder, which is huge, dude. It was like, I think it was MDMA proved to be like 4 times more
Wow.
effective than any other kind of psychiatric intervention for treating long-term effects of PTSD. And I'm
Wow.
forgetting the short term. There's like 2 segments of PTSD where there's this like short-term thing that occurs immediately after the traumatic event before PTSD really sets in. I wish I could remember the name of it, but in this short-term period, and it's classified as its own mental disorder in the DSM-5, when they implemented MDMA and those people who experiencing that like early on symptom, and I forget, I think this was the Johns Hopkins one, where it was like a 6 or 8 month study. It was reducing the amount of PTSD. And this is obviously a contentious point because, you know, every individual is different. But out of this, like it was 45 or 50 person sample size, it was reducing the effects of actual PTSD and the severity of the actual PTSD once they did develop it. It didn't get rid of it, but these like microdosed MDMA treatments did reduce it slightly. You know, it could just be that these 45 to 50 people really did have some kind of like predisposition that prevented them from really developing intense PTSD after the fact. But what's the likelihood of that? Like,
And here's something too, like don't you think, and this is me being you know, I'm on the ethos wave right now. Like I'm not on the pathos wave, okay? But bear with me here for the fucking Republican fuckheads who want to hear only the facts. Nate just gave them to you, so all right. But here's some fucking emotion, right? Like, don't those people who A, fought for our country, and B, were so fucking tortured as children that they have, or as adults, that they have a stress disorder, don't they deserve a shortcut? And who the fuck is the government to tell you that you don't have the ability to access something that could make you fucking better and that could protect other people around you? I mean, people with PTSD, like they have potential to be dangerous to their loved ones, and even more of a widespread impact than that. It's like we can't be so fucking narrow-minded. And so something like I was saying that I respect about my parents is that they were listening to me talk about the positive impacts of psychedelics. And I don't necessarily think they believed me, but or that they were like on board at the end of it, but they listened. And that's the best thing you can do as somebody who, especially as an adult who's like 50, if you can still listen at 50, fuck, that's good. Like, let's get more 50-year-olds that actually listen, you know? And so I was talking to them and they were like, well, you know, like when the government says it's okay to do it, then people just do it. And then I was like, well, you know, like me personally, like I believe that like maybe we're overcorrecting and maybe like heroin shouldn't be legal, but like the war on drugs was such a failure. And my dad was like, yeah, we need to try other shit. And that's the shit we were talking about in the last podcast. It's like we gotta start like, or 2-3 podcasts ago, I was saying like Andrew Yang, like all that shit, like let's take a run at all these different ideas, you know, and because that'll make us better, and just have the humbleness to say like, you know, that didn't work, let's move on, let's do it again, like you know.
ability to admit you're wrong again. Like,
That's on me, Mac Miller, listen to that shit.
yeah, dude, like somebody needs to throw that in Joe Biden's DMs.
Slide it in, no skates.
I mean, like, I think that's interesting. So my parents are really liberal. They had the exact same reaction as your parents.
Really?
Yeah. Like, well, if the government says it's decriminalized and more people can do it, then aren't they just going to want to do it? Because like, oh, I can do it now. It's like this, it's not like that. Like, I was thinking about, here, go ahead. Because I have like a rant that I got to get out.
Don't forget it. This is a quick distinction. My parents actually were against it until I made the distinction that it was decriminalized, not legalized.
Okay. All
and
right.
then they were like, actually, okay,
Yeah.
that's okay. So that's cool. Like I was like,
that is really.
You guys think that's okay? Like that's cool, but keep going.
Yeah, and like my mom, like she was my dad was cool with the decriminalization, but my mom, in her mind, legalization and decriminalization are the same thing. Which
Yeah, understand.
no, it's not the case. you know.
It's not the same, but I can see why someone would think it is.
So this whole thing that this idea she had of now it's permitted, so more people are going to do it. Like, first off, it's shitting in the face of how I think like more preeminent psychologists or addiction therapy like professionals would look at drug addiction and drug use. It's not really like, that's not really a behavior that people do now that it's like okay. Like, they're not going to overly engage in it. Like, I mean, exploratory drug use, perhaps that increases like the frequency of that, but exploratory drug use is like a large part of that transitioning to habitual drug use is like there's underlying traumas like PTSD or like an untreated mental illness.
Yes.
And the people who are going to go ahead like and break the law, I was, I was watching David Finch was making a murderer, or no, Mind Hunters on
Okay.
Netflix. And I was thinking like, these people who are serial killers, they have this itch that they need to scratch, right? Like, there is like the only reason the law is there because for most people, they're not going to do it anyways, So purely out of it slightly reduces in the same way that criminalizing drugs or drug possession slightly reduces that exploratory usage. Barely, right? Criminalizing being a serial killer slightly reduces that exploratory thing. Like, a sane person isn't going to go out and like, just do it for the hell of it. But if it was totally decriminalized, it's like, maybe I'm going to, go on a coke binge and kill someone, just for the hell
Try
of it.
this shit out. Yeah.
Right. So, but with the people who really do have something fundamentally wrong with them, where they're like, this behavior is an itch, I need to scratch that itch, it's only a matter of time before they go ahead and do that. Like, how many times have you been told not to itch mosquito bites? You still do it. Like, it builds up after a while.
To the scab, bro. I itch that shit down to the scab.
Yeah. And it's like
that idea of like, don't think about an elephant. Oh, you just thought about one. Like,
yeah.
it's like that. It's like, and I think too, understanding addiction is important. Like, spending time to understand where a physical or chemical dependency comes from. Like, you gotta, like, I'm not trying to say that like I'm an expert, but I have listened and researched it, and like, it's like a lot of the things, like I saw this TED talk about it, and like TED Talks, some whack ass people on those things, but like there's some good ones too, and I think it's interesting to just like take everything with a grain of salt. Like, that's a message that I hope that we put out to everyone. It's like, fucking, you better not buy into everything you listen to. Like, like, take it with a grain of salt. But I do think like something interesting in a TED Talk that, what's that?
You watch that TED Talk with Johan Ari?
I think so.
The dude who was talking about addiction and how it's run in Sweden?
I think so. He talks about how addiction is like much more of like a dependence on the lack of like human interaction and love.
Yes.
That's what I've seen.
That's an amazing TED Talk.
Absolutely beautiful. And when you see, so just for people who haven't seen it, when you see something like that, he explains how like the dependency on drugs is not much to do with, there is a physical or chemical dependency that you could obtain when you start doing a drug that's addictive. But the reason that you're there in the first place is not because you're addicted to something. Like, you're there because you're finding an outlet, right? And maybe it's like a negative shortcut. Like, maybe where psychedelics have a positive shortcut to finding something out good about yourself, like a negative effect of a more influential or damaging drug could be that you have a shortcut towards a worse interaction or a worse like life, that kind of thing, where it's like you don't have basically his main point is like people are lacking connection. And I think the beautiful thing that Oregon is doing for those who don't know, and we'll see in time if this really works, we don't know, but they're throwing money, the tax money that they're making on the weed that they're selling, into free rehabilitation for people who don't have that support system. And if that works, Jesus fucking Christ, like, we really figured some shit out there.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I almost hate it. I almost hate that, jargon of chemical dependency, because, I mean, like that guy was saying, like you were just talking about, it's not that. You remember the woman that he's talking about who Kanye sampled part of her song in Blood on the Leaves? Um, it's Strange Fruit. Um, I forget her name, but he mentions the fact that she said heroin was the only thing that saved my life, because when there was absolutely nothing, it gave her a sense of love and comfort that nothing else did. And that's not condoning heroin. It's just saying this is that shortcut that we're talking about. Like, that shortcut to love and connection can be found through these drugs that produce such euphoria that you're like, well, I must be loved by something. So it's like,
You're loved about the drug. That's what the talk is talking about, right?
Yeah, it's not a chemical dependency. It's a dependency on the way that it makes you feel. The same way some people get dependent on basketball because of the way it makes them feel. So it's like the way that Sweden does it, where they're set, and a lot of Norwegian.
What is it, Brazil or Portugal?
Brazil does not do that, dude. Brazil doesn't give a fuck. But Portugal, they just made everything legal. Although they don't have the best addiction rehab centers, it's a lot of the Scandinavian countries. They have these community support systems within, the same way, like I have a few people in my life who were into some drugs at different points in their life and are now involved in AA. And you talk to them and it's like, oh, dude, you're a different person than you were before. Like, the way that they talk about it, it's a whole community. So creating that sense of community, and in these Scandinavian countries where they have these rehab centers that allow people to engage in work retraining, or having a support group of other people who have been through similar shit. Like, I mean, people shun trauma bonds often, but like that trauma of having addiction, or then creating that bond with a ton of other people who have experienced a similar thing, like, that's so powerful. That gives them such a sense of community. And then when everybody is pushing each other, like, hey man, you're loved, you're supported, go find a job, go succeed. It's no wonder they have the lowest addiction rates and relapse rates in, like, the world. Like, it's crazy that nobody else is adopting that. I mean, it's not that crazy. And this is where I'm bringing my pessimistic mindset in. It's not crazy when you look at how much that costs and how little we want to care about those people that aren't already succeeding off of the bare minimum, especially in American culture or other kind of capitalism fetishizing cultures. But like, it's surprising that with this idea of patriotism, of bring up your fellow American, of take care of your brother and neighbor, that we wouldn't have a system like this.
But Nate, don't you think we were taught, we is the wrong word, our parents and their parents and their parents, most specifically, like a few generations back, they weren't taught to bring up their friends. Like, they were taught to bring themselves up. It's like that saying, like, pick yourselves up by the bootstrap. Like, you pick you up.
I know, but it's a bastardization of what the founding fathers stood for. The founding fathers, it was literally
for certain, but I think those times were more of like a either you survive or you don't, like, and that's why it's like pick yourself up by the bootstrap. But like you're saying, like, the founding fathers, like, we really started this shit too. And this is something you talked about in the last podcast. It's made me so fucking upset. It's like, we had the best intentions in creating this country, and now we're looking at, people like you and me are looking at the Scandinavian countries. Like, I did a cultural interview for one of my classes with a girl named Natalia from Norway, and dude, like, her country has given her some money to come study here.
Yeah.
Like her tuition would have been paid for if she stayed in Norway. And even though she didn't stay, they're giving her some fucking money to come study here. It's like,
Yeah.
and like, how do you scale that? And our country is much larger than theirs, but it's like, whatever, like, we could
Yeah.
figure that shit out. And
I also,
our founding fathers would say, we could figure that shit out. And why
yeah,
aren't we saying that?
that whole argument too of like, oh, we're too big. I fucking hate that argument so much because it's
What
just,
an excuse that is from people who say that you shouldn't use excuses to stop you
yeah,
from
dude,
succeeding.
it's not a raw population thing. It's a per capita GDP thing. Like per
Hmm.
capita, we're still wealthier than Sweden or Norway. Like, so that means like the problem is how we're spending it. Like,
But it's also not the majority, right? That the majority of our population isn't wealthier than them.
no, but if you're talking about, so our raw GDP, um, per capita, so divide that amongst every single American versus one of those Scandinavian countries' GDP and divide that against every single person within
Hmm.
Norway, we're still wealthier per capita. The
Hmm.
problem is the fact that all of our wealth is concentrated on one side of the spectrum. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, and the fact that we're mismanaging it at a governmental level, like, we
Hmm.
don't need to be spending that much on defense. I know people don't like to hear that, but like, dude, we were talking about this the other day with like cyber warfare.
Yeah.
Like, we probably don't need to buy that many tanks. Like, like only losers wage ground wars now. It's all digital, man. Like, which is true. Like, it's so
Yeah.
much more dangerous, or it's so much more effective to wage a cyber war than it is a ground war. That like one of the largest wars going on right now in terms of allocating of resources between us and China, and it's all online. It's a purely cyber war, and like most people don't know about it. It's like the Cold
Hmm.
War times 10, and like nobody's paying attention to that.
And we're losing.
Yeah, we are.
As an American, you better fucking look yourself in the face and say, we are getting fucked right now. Like,
Yeah,
we're not even close to winning.
yeah,
Like, China is fucking us. And I agree with you, Nate. Like, the JRE, Joe has people on who talk about the benefits of military and the impact that they can make on developing countries. And I think that that is absolutely um, important. I think that that is part of our duty as a country, but I think that it is also something to consider, like time and a place. Like maybe if we weren't trillions of dollars in debt and our people weren't starving and our people weren't being oppressed, maybe we could go help other people not to be oppressed. And I think that this is something that actually I think Republicans and Democrats kind of agree with. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like people don't want our country to fail
yeah,
and still see, like, people who really look at it with a realistic perspective see our country failing, and they also see our country pouring resources into other places that are failing. It's like that mental health thing, dude. It's like, it's
yeah,
simple. It's like, if you can't help yourself, how the fuck are you going to help anybody else, right?
yeah,
Like that's got to be a truth that we hold ourselves to.
yeah. But dude, I don't think it's the issue that we're pouring it into other countries. If I'm being totally honest, I mean, we are pouring it into other countries, but it's not in that way of like a humanitarian effort. Like our Peace Corps spending is not what's fucking us. Like we're pouring into other countries by allowing people to take advantage of tax havens. We're pouring into other countries by
Mm.
allowing like
Slave labor.
US, yeah, slave labor, allowing US based countries to use stuff like sweatshops,
That's the
like
biggest fucking contradiction
yeah,
that I've seen, and that's the biggest contradiction I've seen in my business programs. I've been taking this global business course, and it's like, yeah, corruption's okay because like you need to
it's
play
good
by the
business.
rules of the country that you're in.
Yeah,
And I'm talking to my professor. I'm like, listen, but like, why wouldn't we hold ourselves to a higher standard? He's like, no,
Yeah,
no, you don't understand. Like when you are expanding globally, like you have to accept the cultural norms of that society. It's like, no, 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 no. Listen,
yeah, that's an imposed cultural norm. Like, it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
hold ourselves to a higher standard. If the American citizen would just take time to hold themselves to that higher standard of like morality, well then we could really start fixing things. Like we could really stop, like you're saying, pouring resources into things that aren't helping us get better, and if we can't help ourselves, we can't help anybody else. I think that's one of the sole truths of our country and our
Yeah.
contribution to the world.
And I mean, dude, we've talked a lot about unity, and I get the whole thing about help yourself before you help others is not very Unitarian. But like for those people who are listening, like understand we are talking about how um, you know, think about the country as entities. The US is one massive individual, and we're just all the cells that are making that up. And if
Mm,
those cells are at war, the body can't work. But like
mm,
we want to help other countries. It's literally just, as you're saying, help ourselves first, like make sure that we're just in a position to do that. But that's not like, we're not trying to like shit on the unity message. It's still important. Um, yeah,
yeah.
but dude, I always go back to this. Ben Franklin's drawing of the 13 colonies as 13 segmented areas of a snake. I mean, that was an extremely powerful, like, I mean, that's also like, that's a commentary on the quality of journalism now too, where it's no longer about these insightful messages that unite us and
Yeah. Oh
get
my
us to try
God.
and like take on the issues that really are affecting things. Now it's really just like, be mad about this issue, but don't do anything about it, because then it fucks up our bottom line. Like, um, you know,
Dude, Ben Franklin was such a fucking cool guy. I mean, just to
yeah,
prove your point, like he used to write an almanac, and do you remember it's like the Poor Man's Almanac or something like that?
it's
What's it
still
called?
still publication.
What's it
Our
called?
almanac.
Yeah. So
Yes.
he would write an almanac, and it was the only book that poor people could afford, and they would buy it every year. And it had insights, it had riddles, it had weather predictions, it had advice, and it was, it was cheap. And he wrote it, like Nate said, like it was a source of unity. He wrote it so that people who couldn't afford to educate themselves with literature could afford every year to buy a book that allowed them to get a new perspective on the world. And like Nate's saying, like journalism, all it does now is just narrow your perspective on the
Yeah.
world. And it's sickening.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fucking depressing
Yeah.
to read a headline. You could read 50 headlines and 49 of them would be depressing as fuck. Like
Yeah.
maybe 50 of them. Like, but Nate, like exactly what you're saying, like why can't we fight for unity and opinion and empathy and that kind of thing? It's like,
You, do you think it's a sign of the times to some degree?
yeah, I think it absolutely is a sign of the times. I think a lot of people are so upset that they can't see unity, and maybe that's their right to be that upset.
Yeah. I
And
mean, also, I'm going to say a few divisive statements. I just need people to ride this out. Founding fathers, they're it's difficult because I really do hate the founding fathers, but I also love what they stood for, because it's just a web of hypocrisies. But that's also what America really stands for, because they were the original socialists, and the fact that they did really want everybody to, you know, be one and stand up as one, but also they pioneered that kind of like capitalist attitude of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But they also, they didn't allow anybody who was anything other than a white landowning male to really get in on a piece of the pie. Um, but I mean, also because all of that knowledge was relegated to only the rich classes at the time, you had these Renaissance men who knew so much about so many different things that had a really zoomed out perspective. So because they were able to think that abstractly about things, they weren't hyper focusing on the things that we are now and have to be focused on now because they didn't have that knowledge economy that we have now. Like for the average man in 2020, average woman to average day, like you need to hyper focus on one kind of discipline, um, business or psychology or healthcare for somebody else if you really want to make it in a field.
Yeah.
Like back then, they could literally just, if you were wealthy, like Ben Franklin, George Washington, all of them, like they could just go, fuck it. I'm going to learn about history, English, like Spanish. I'm going to learn French. Like all those guys spoke like 4 languages. Like they knew a ton about like a ton of different subjects. Like,
Yeah, dude, and the thing about Benny Frank too is like I think I'm almost certain about this. The almanac was like his biggest source of income,
really,
and so in a world where you can make the majority of your money by benefiting other people, I
yeah,
mean, that is like truly my optimistic view of business.
that
And
that's the problem with everything now, though. It's
mm,
economics do the worst thing.
yes,
You know that quote where it's like, as long as it's more profitable to chop up a tree and burn it for fuel than it is to let it stand, then we're doomed to something something. I want to say that's like a Henry David Thoreau quote, but I
yeah,
don't know.
I think I've heard that.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, I cut you off. What?
No, no, I think that ties in beautifully. It's understanding what the way the world runs, and like right now the world runs on greed, and I think the capitalism breeds greed, and I think the capitalism also breeds growth, and I think that there's evil in everything that's good.
Yeah, dude,
And go ahead.
I was having this talk with my dad about like just economic systems right now. And it's exactly what you're saying about greed ruling everything.
Mhm.
Um, like if you look, and also we were talking about a little bit what we were talking about, I think 2 podcasts ago with the washing away of history. When we look back at our history, you look back far enough, you're going to see almost every issue we're dealing with right now at some point in time. When we were going through like the Neolithic Revolution and figuring out like, oh, we have surplus of food for the first time. Everybody eats like that, at a tribal level, like this argument of size is always brought up that we were talking about earlier. Like at that level where everybody in your tribe, it's easy to say everybody eats and everybody should, you know? Uh,
Mm,
and you see the direct benefits within your community because your entire world is just that community. So everybody eats, there's more kids, you have more hunters, you get more food, you start to get arts because we had like not subsistence farming, surplus farming. We
yes.
have the ability to just stay in one place, like tame
Mm,
animals and shit, use them for agriculture. We have art now, like we have advanced weapons. Suddenly there's like um, iron, bronze, all of that. Like, what happens when we have a surplus and ensure that everybody does not falter, or at least the lowest is even taken care of, having that safety net that
yeah,
allows for so much growth. And that is the argument of socialism with capitalism. Like, if
right.
we create a safety net for people, but keep these capitalist values and capitalist tendencies of growth and innovation, think about how much we can do. When you
Mm,
don't feel like every single economic decision you make could potentially ruin you and your family, especially with the family part, because suddenly you have some like if you have a group of 4 or 5 people who are relying on everything that you do, like how risky are you going to be? Are you going to try
right,
and
right.
you know
Be
forge
better
that
at them.
new idea? Yeah. Are you
Or
going to try and do better?
are you gonna sell some snake oil because you know it'll feed your family? Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think like something interesting too to go off of that is like a statistic that I had read like I don't know years back, like sophomore, freshman year of high school, and it could be completely wrong, but I bet you that it's semi-true. Is that like the world's population could fit in LA? Like the entire world could fit in the city of LA. Like if they all stood in like side by side kind of thing. So maybe LA is wrong, but maybe the state of California. So we're not running out of space. We're not running out of resources. Like we're running out of a humanitarian we're running out of motivation to present resources in a way that we
It's to present
empathetically present resources, right? So
Yeah.
we understand that like we have enough to go around. We're running out of that ideology where we state like we have the land, we have the economy, we have the money, food, the environment to present everyone with a sustainable level of life.
Yeah.
We're not running out of those resources yet. We might, but we're not. We're running out of the ability to understand that other people need that, and that when you have it, if you don't give some of it away, you're contributing to the problem.
Right. Dude, Rogan talks about that all the time with the famine mentality within comedy. I wish he had just a slightly wider worldview because, like, the core of what he's talking about is so applicable to everything. But it's just like, you know, the famine mentality of existing within, like, around other people. Like, I see, let's say I'm 15. I've never seen another person before. I somehow like I came out of my mom's pussy and she disappeared. No doctors around, right? And I have all these berries, all these leaves, all this wood. One other person. My immediate gut reaction is, what if they take my stuff? How am I going to have enough now? So back again to breaking our biology.
Break it, bro. We gotta break it. We've been around for so long. Let's fucking do. What are we doing? And I say that to myself all the time. I'm such a hypocrite, dude. You know, in my relationship with my girlfriend, who I love so much and would like to spend the rest of my life with, like, I find myself all the time, like, making excuses and you know, like, like this, that, and the other thing. It's like, like, listen, like, we are bigger and better than this urge to be our most purest form of survival. Like, we are so much more than that. And the problem with people who don't encourage that is like somebody who doesn't encourage the human spirit to fight the thing, like to fight. We don't need to survive anymore. Like some people do, but the people who don't need to survive anymore, I should say, the people who don't need to survive anymore, they need to contribute to the survival of those who still do, instead of contributing to their own survival, which they already have on fucking lock. Like, they already got that shit figured out. Like, listen, like, I'm gonna have my shit figured out, and I will be fucking damned if I don't understand and try to contribute to the survival of others who are not in the same position as I am. And that's the thing. It's like, why can't we figure that out? And I think that's where you get bummed out. And I'm really starting to understand why. Like, that is depressing as shit.
It is. Dude, the most depressing part is we know how to do it. If we really wanted to, we could do it all tomorrow. Tomorrow we could solve world hunger. Tomorrow we could solve global poverty. The problem is, even if, how many countries are in the world? Like 270 something?
Yeah.
Let's say 200, let's call it 270. If 269 countries stand together to say, okay, we are going to make sure that everybody's taken care of, that one country who abstains, they benefit from that economically because now they don't have to contribute anything, and the whole world is now producing more because they have more knowledge, they have more resources, so now they have more capital to trade with that new market. It's so fucked up that, like, this is why, like, every time I think about these things, I just, like, I get overwhelmed, and, like, I'm sure there's so many out there that feel the same way. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's just like, the core of the system does not work as long as that is the case. As long as one country abstaining from doing, or one person abstaining from doing the right thing and gaining something from it exists, we're never going to be able to do the right thing because we always have human greed.
I feel like if one country or one person disagreed, I feel like the majority could rule, though. Don't you think?
Well, let's look at the Paris Accords. So Trump took us out of the Paris Accords how long ago? Like a few years ago. That was like an agreement between a ton of developed countries that we were going to try and do the right thing here and negate our effects on climate change to slow it. And
I remember that.
yeah, it's really, climate change is not going to affect us developed countries as much as it's going to affect the developing countries. So places like
Yeah.
Japan, like a lot of sub-Saharan countries.
China, I mean, China's being wildly affected by their own contribution to climate change.
Yeah, they're still, they're not leading the world, but they are in terms of trajectory more green than the US right now because they're implementing so, I know.
Really?
You want to hear some other shit? Well, I'll finish this and then I'll blow
I'm
your.
sorry. Yeah, I did interrupt you. Keep going.
No,
Keep
no,
going. We need to hear this. We need to hear this.
so China's more like, their trajectory for overall renewables is higher than the US's right now because they're investing so much money into it because they do realize that long term economically this is going to help them more because these renewable resources aren't going anywhere. They have to be the way of the future. And like you're saying, they're already seeing the effects of it. Like it's this thing of, okay, only once it affects me will I really worry about it. So it's
Yeah, that's
China's
the human
okay.
condition.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, this river is now totally fucked up. I guess we need to start making wind turbine farms. Like, they have a lot of issues over there, but another interesting thing, as of 2019, social mobility in China is higher than it is in the US.
This is something you talked about before, and I actually want to do some research in this. We have decided, you and I, that we want to start to do intensive research on an area of folk, like some sort of subject, and say like, hey, like, if we can look this shit up and understand it better, like we can present it to our viewers, that kind of thing. So that might be something we look into. But go ahead and tell me about it, bro. I'm right here. I'm ready. Yourself, bro.
I was scrolling through my feeds. You remember Dogface 208? The dude with like the cranberry like bottle in the Fleetwood Mac song. I saw this post where it was like 2020 turned around after this dude showed up. And I was just like scrolling through like his recents. He kind of doesn't give a fuck. I love his energy. It's like all positive vibes.
We need more of that.
Yeah.
Bro. Dude, tell me about the upward mobility in China right now. I'm ready to hear about that.
Okay. All right.
And
so,
dude, tell me where you heard about it from too.
So we were learning about it in sociology class, and I was kind of like, so I consulted the economic expert, Tom Morrill.
Who is that?
My dad. He was sending me like a ton of things about like, oh, well, you don't understand, just like, it's so, since they have so much more meritocracy over there in the lower levels of society, there's actually more social mobility than in the US. I was like, that's bullshit. So I was reading this Reuters article, and then there was one other from like King's College. I think that's somewhere in the UK. But it was talking about how so social mobility over there, and it's difficult, right? Because they have that social credit score in CCP occupied like cities, such as the capital. Like you can't really get in if you have a low enough social credit score, which interestingly enough is determined off of socioeconomic status and your loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. So there's a lot of fuckery going on there. However, for the people that are already in that like middle class range or lower middle class or even working class, the amount of social mobility is crazy. because they have so many new, like I'm sure you know, they have state-sponsored companies over there. So they're not state-owned. It's literally just like it's boosted by the state. But because of that, they're like at the end of their industrial revolution right now, right? That's why China was such a big polluter for so long. So now that they're out of this industrial revolution, similar to the way that we came out of our industrial revolution, and there was this kind of golden era of new jobs and the American dream and crazy social mobility that was happening in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, like kind of into the 70s, but has since dwindled. They're experiencing that right now. So Chinese, yeah, Chinese parents, their kids are going off to, you know, university, then they're getting better jobs than their parents. You know, that's not really happening in the US anymore. In the US, we're seeing these cyclical poverty cycles, or also just like getting stuck in the middle class. Like there isn't really a whole lot of upward or downward social mobility in the US right now, outside of, I mean, obviously there's more downward mobility, but there's this weird thing where we're almost relegated to the social class we're born into, this almost like de facto caste system. And a lot of it is the fact that we are so isolated in communities right now. It's almost this weird kind of like de facto segregation thing that's happened in public schools, where since they're funded through a state or community, these public schools breed a certain type of middle class white kid because they're paid for by middle class white families and offer a middle class white education to get you into middle class white colleges, universities.
Wow, that just really hit home.
Yeah, I mean, but it happens at every level. Whereas in China, there is this growing sentiment that the harder you work, the better off you will be, and it's been around forever, but now it's really coming into fruition.
But Nate, like to your point, don't you think that there's like rich Americans who breed rich Americans? There's a statistic that says generational or wealth only lasts 3 generations.
That's I think that's horseshit.
Yeah, I mean, based on, I don't know, maybe it's not horseshit, but based on people who I know, like the wealthiest people I know go to private school and they know way more than me.
Yeah.
like I don't really necessarily think that private school is like the best option for your kid. Like I don't think that's gonna make, especially from a social standpoint, like them the most adept and like empathetic version of themselves. But like
It's a factor. It's just
yeah.
a factor, but it's significant. Like it's also a large part of it, like talking about the socialization you receive at public school is so much different. Like at private school, I'm sure it fosters this independent thought of, we want good business, we don't want good business. Whereas public school, it's kind of like, oh, like I'm seeing all these different people from so many different walks of life, where it's like, you know, I don't want to do something where it's like I can, you know, oh, going back to the tribe, you can see your whole community right there. That's your world. In public school. In private school, you're just seeing a section of that tribe. You're just seeing the merchant class. Like
it's a little tiny fucking constricted bit of perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where my parents, who are Republican, don't believe in private school. They're public school teachers, and they're like, listen, like the socialization you get in a private school, a private institution, is like, that's not, like you're saying, that's not breeding a perspective that is inclusive of the whole. And like you're saying too, I think that that is evidence of a lack of social mobility. And I think that as somebody who believes in like forward progress, and somebody who believes in the power of the human spirit and the will of a person to succeed, it's hard for me to say this, but I think that people are at a disadvantage when they don't get a broadened perspective of the way that the world is in real life, instead of the way the world is presented to them, you know.
And that's why we need these safety nets in every aspect of culture. Because I mean, if we learned anything from this podcast, like not just this episode, but like all the times we fucking talked on here, it's that all these issues are so interconnected. Like this whole thing about like it, have a safety net for socialization, that's kind of public school. Have a safety net for like finances, that's kind of like universal basic income. Have a safety net for ensuring class mobility. Like we just need to make sure that like schools, institutions, like they're all funded equally. Like we need like I might step on toes here, but a lot of the stuff that we're petitioning for, they're all socialist values that have this really scary connotation in the US because we don't look at socialization or socialism as what it is. We don't look at it as it's like a group of people helping other people.
We look at it as a threat.
Yeah, which is brainwashing. Like, how many other times has our government or some other kind of institution within the place that we grew up tried to brainwash us on something that we grow up and find as horseshit?
It's not a threat. It's just a change. And don't be such a fucking pussy that you're scared of change.
You know what? It is a threat. It's a threat to the people who are really in power and want to hold on to that because
right.
That 3-generation thing is another lie that we've been told. We're not going to get the money out of the hands of the rich after 3 generations. Like, you amass a ton of land. Land is the only resource that really appreciates in value. You're supposed to hold on to that for fucking ever. Like that, literally, like you get $100 billion worth of assets. Every single person in your lineage, as long as they hold on to that, they're fine forever. They never have to work. That just appreciates and appreciates and appreciates. And you can literally live off the interest of 100 mil. Like just keep 100 mil in the bank. You'll be gravy.
But Nate, you could live off the interest of fucking $500,000, like or $800,000. Like I think that what people don't understand is like, you know, what kind of message are we sending when we tell people that they need to, you know, sort of like buy into a certain mentality where like, I think that this is the clash of the two parties right here, right? Where we're saying like, the Democrats are saying like, fuck you, man. Like you're taking so much more than you're giving. And the Republicans are saying like, well, if you gave a little more, how much more would you get? And it's like, okay, maybe we can figure this out where it's like, we have a mentality that both understands that we have to put in ample effort and energy in order to be happy with ourselves, not to make money, to be happy with our own value and our own life purpose. We have to put in so much energy, and to teach anybody that you don't need to try in order to be happy is fucking dog shit. And I know you believe that. I know you do. And that's a misconstrued idea of the left, that you don't need to try to be happy. That's bullshit. And people who really understand psychology understand that that's not real. And the people on the left are saying, but listen, like some people have such a hard time being happy, and you need to understand as a happy person that they need your help. And like just drawing that line, dude, it's like, if we could figure that shit out, you know? Does that make sense?
Kind
or
of.
am I just hammered?
I don't think I'm as hammered as you are. I don't think
definitely not.
But
I'm gonna tell you right now, you're not as hammered as me. But
I get.
That's my fault.
No, I get what you're saying, because you're like, here's the thing. You're saying a central truth in all of that, right? I'm just too fucking tired to like fully like grasp it, like, because you're saying there are all of these differing ideologies, right? And out of all these differing ideologies, we love to sit in our own little ideological tribes and say,
so safe, so comfortable.
Yeah. Like
pussy shit.
It's literally just, okay, this is what I like, this is what I'm used to, whatever. Like, so I think if we could find that unifying perspective, you're right. We could fix everything. I don't even think it's a party thing as much as it is individual humans,
Mm,
because you do have a very diverse spectrum of opinions on the right and on the left and in the
mm.
center. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met where it's like, oh, you say you're like a conservative, but you sound like so progressive, or you say you're a liberal, but you sound so conservative, or you say you're a centrist, but you have like radical Marxist ideas. Like,
The
you know what I
silent majority, baby.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just like dude, we gotta fucking workshop this in this upcoming week. If we can find that theory that we could fucking put out somewhere, or just that perspective, and I don't know
Mm.
how the fuck we do that, but
I think we can. I think we can start by interviewing our friends,
yeah,
like FaceTime somebody and be like, "This, I'm recording this. Like, but can you tell me like your thoughts on this, and that, and the other? Like three questions."
right,
People who are on one side or the other. I think that it comes with understanding the perspective of the majority. I don't think that the majority is represented in the media that we consume. I really don't think so. I don't think that the majority is represented. Jesus Christ, is represented in the election count. I mean, Joe Jorgensen had like what, 9% of the fucking votes. That's not the majority. That's not the majority of how people actually think. Like
right.
that is
Nuanced perspective.
people are just pushing down
Yeah,
their opinions and thoughts on things in order to fit in with, a certain tribe. And I think it's just like, for me, it's just like we need to really, I think that if we do anything with this podcast, it is to unify a silent majority that understands the power of a complete being free from believing so much in an ideology that it
yeah,
becomes who you are.
yeah, yeah, dude. I I believe that wholly. Like, once anything becomes the entirety of their personality, it's that thing we were talking about before with self-identity. Suddenly it's the hardest thing to get outside of.
Yeah,
And
you
political
got
ideology is one of those easy things to let become a lot of your personality. So
mm,
it's like, you're not gonna fucking admit you're wrong if it's a foundation of your beliefs, or a foundation of your self-identity.
right.
Dude, I mean, we're starting this already, like with the Join the Revolution like playlist, just cobble together some songs that mean something to us, like personally, that kind of like share a message, I think. Uh,
100%.
yeah,
And please too, if you're listening, like throw in suggestions. We'll add it. 100% we'll add it. Like,
yeah,
like we really, I think this is something that Nate and I are really passionate about, and we understand the legwork that it takes to get something like this started. And we're here for the long run, and like we really do care about the opinion and input that people have on this podcast. And so if you were to like throw us a couple of song requests, like that would mean everything to us. And like,
yeah,
I think that kind of, as we're wrapping this up, like, because I got hammered and Nate ran out of alcohol. I mean, I hope this isn't too hard to listen to, but, um, I just think that as our listeners, if you're hearing this right now, like, just know two things. First of all, we appreciate the fuck out of you. And second of all, like, we want to go on this journey with you. Like, we're in the pursuit of figuring out the truths that rule our lives. And like, we hope that you could come on that journey with us and teach us as you listen. And in order to teach us, you have to interact. And we want that interaction. Do you agree, Nate?
yeah, dude. If we have if we have an army of people who think similarly to us, or think different but share the same values, like, again, going back to like why we do this is beautiful because we share the same values but think differently. So like,
Mm,
you can get a fuck ton more people who share the same values as us. Think about how much smarter we're all gonna get. Like, I'd love to hear what people have to say. Like, I know not to be like, yo, drop a comment, subscribe, but like, it would be great to hear like on our Instagram, Blissfully Unaware podcast, or just in the comments of this video, like, leave how you feel about this. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think could change the world? Like, all of that. And I know that's tacky and cliche, but it is really meant.
It's not to make us bigger, it's to make us better. Like, like it really truly, like, believe us when we say, like, we just care what you think. Like, it's not because that'd be cool to get a comment, like, or a share would make us have another view. Like,
Yeah.
fuck that, like.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd way rather have 30 people watch this and see 30 different ideas about like what we talked about or what their opinions are on these things than have, 1,000 people and only 5 are like, well, here's my ideas.
Dude, so cool that you said that, because I said that shit in the introduction of the 6th episode. Yeah, 6th episode that we just posted. We're a little late on.
Seriously.
I said that in the introduction, Nate. I was like, we had 40 views on the last post, and the post before that we had 130, and I was like, it doesn't matter to us. Like, we just care that you listened, like, and that's the most important thing. And like, if we can slowly build that up, then we'll be happy, and if we keep it at 40, we'll be happy. Like, this is the shit that we want to do to the people who are affected by it, and it doesn't matter how big or small that group is.
Yeah. On that note, should we end it?
Yeah, dude.
Did we ever intro this?
We didn't intro it.
It's fine. We'll do it now.
This is the intro and the conclusion. Go ahead, give it to him.
Was this episode 7?
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this was episode 7, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We're gonna figure out a title and all that. I'm guessing we're gonna go back in and put some kind of an intro, just so people know what's up. But yeah, thank you so much for listening.
We love the fuck out of you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.